So welcome again. Tonight we're going to talk about positioning and movement in and around the penalty area. This may seem a bit more advanced for the grassroots level, but I think since we've got enough time with these weekly webinars now, we can start to explore maybe a little bit more advanced subjects and also begin to understand the importance of some of the minutia of refereeing, which penalty area positioning and movement definitely counts. So instead of the just really standard clip analysis we've been doing week over week the last couple of months, tonight is going to be more education based. So I've got a slide deck that I'll work through here with you, talking about how we want you positioning yourself and moving in and around the penalty area. Obviously, these are big decisions in the game, and so we want to make sure that you're positioning yourself as well as possible for incidents that happen inside the penalty area so that you can make the most informed decision possible. So I want to start with just a clip. I'm going to show you this one time and allow you to make your own decision. I'm not going to put a poll up here because it's a bit deceitful for me to do so. So I'm just going to play this for you and let you watch it a couple times, and then we'll talk about it. So we have a PK called here by the referee. Play it for you again. And with apologies, my computer seems to be running a little slow today, so I'm sorry if the video gets a little laggy for you. Play it one more time. And in particular, watch as the play goes over to the right side of the penalty area. Watch where the referee runs. You can see the referee runs over to the left there, and then we have a tackle on the ball or not, hard to tell, and a player falls down. Looks like a pretty clear penalty from where we're sitting at the moment. However, if I fast forward and I give you this view of it, whoops. Player actually doesn't make any contact with the opponent. So if we watch it from behind, we can see the player in black reaches his foot out, puts it on the ground, doesn't ever actually touch the player in white. Player in white drags his leg, falls down. He's taken a dive here. There was actually no foul committed by this player in black here, if you watch it again. Never touches him. That's a simple dive. As you can see here, MLS VAR comes in, no penalty kick, and he actually gives a yellow card for the dive. So what makes this such a difficult decision is at the moment of the challenge, you can see where the referee is, just back here. He's looking through this player, through the body of the player committing the foul, and to here, he's just simply not able to see this. Now, this is a really difficult play, a very well-taken dive here from the attacker, so it's going to be hard for this referee to get this right, but we're going to talk a little bit now tonight about what you can do in and around the penalty area to position yourself to get decisions like this more accurate, more consistently. Because at the end of the day, we don't have VAR in the games that we're refereeing, which means we don't get a second shot at getting these decisions correctly. So if you call this a penalty kick in your game, there's no chance you get to come back and fix that. So we'll talk a little bit about how we want to position ourselves in and around the penalty area and how we move to do so that we're able to get these decisions as accurate as possible. So David Valkanar, you're the first victim tonight. I asked you not to make any comments, only submit questions via the chat feature. So please do not do that because, again, you've made a comment here that is incorrect. You said that is right in front of VAR. The answer to that is no. It's actually too far away from the assistant referee, and the assistant referee does not have the appropriate depth perception to be able to determine if contact was actually made with the opponent. So David is a good example of why I don't want you submitting comments via the chat feature, because anybody who takes away the idea that the assistant referee should be involved here, would be incorrect. So please limit your commentary to simply questions. So, some things to think about when we're talking about positioning in and around the penalty area. We're going to talk about the angle of view a lot. This is going to be how you can see the play that we're talking about. So again, if we go back to that freeze frame that we showed here, you can see the angle of view for this referee is not great because he's looking through players and he's looking directly behind one player to another, and that causes a problem. So one thing we want to try to accomplish as much as possible is to get a side view, viewing between the players or through the players, if you will, instead of viewing from behind one to the other. So think about looking at something from the side versus looking at it from behind. If you're looking at it from the side, you can see both players and you can see between them, which helps you with decisions like we just saw a moment ago. If you can see between those two players, you're more likely to get that decision correct. If you're looking through the back of one player to another player, now you're screened from what that player's doing. You can't see if there's any contact. You're screened and you can't make a good decision. We want you to be able to see the ball. Again, with this last replay we saw, and I'll go back to it when I'm done with all these considerations, the referee is not able to see the ball. And so he can't see if there's if the attacker or the defender has actually played the ball when making that challenge. And so if you can't see the ball, you can't see if the ball gets played, which means you can't tell if contact between two players is legal or not legal. So we need to be able to see the ball. You need to be able to see the exact moment of contact. You might have heard me talk about this before when I talk about decision-making components, the mode of contact and the point of contact. You need to see both of those to be able to tell if a foul has occurred or not. Seeing the exact moment of contact is crucial for you to know if there's a foul. And then, of course, we need to see the speed and the movement of the players. If you can see that trail leg of the attacker who takes the dive there, you're going to see that before there's any contact, he starts to drag that leg, which is a good red flag for us to be aware of a potential dive. If you ever see a player dragging their leg like that before they get to an opponent, good chance they're taking a dive there. Lastly, this isn't relevant necessarily to this play, but we need you to see the entire penalty area. We need to take positions where we can see with our peripheral vision the entire width or depth of the penalty area, depending on where we are at any given time. And so we want you thinking about how you orient your body in and around the penalty area so that you can see with your peripheral vision as much as possible inside the penalty area. So we'll talk a little bit about what happens in and around that penalty area. Sonny, that's a good question. Should the referee be positioned just inside the penalty area to the right of the D to see that dive? I'll actually come back to it once we talk about this a little bit. So allow me to work through a little bit of this content and then I'll come back to it. But good question, Sonny. Thank you. So obviously the penalty area is in our attacking third. When we talk about positioning and movement around the entire field, this is how we divide it up. We divide it into thirds. We have the defensive third, which means this is where the fullbacks and the center backs might be. Middle third is where our midfield is going to be. Attacking third is where our forwards will be. That's when we're attacking towards the goal. So the referee is going to be this yellow box here, anywhere in this yellow box, and the players and the active play is this blue box. So when play is in the attacking third, we want you to have let play past you by this point, and we want the play in front of you, you behind play, looking into the penalty area. So you can see the arrows are the angle of view that we want you to have as a referee. Now, obviously, where it is in the penalty area is going to determine where you are width-wise or depth-wise on the field. We won't worry about that at the moment. Just know that when the play is in this blue area somewhere, we want you somewhere in this yellow area. Not ahead of it, but definitely behind it, but looking towards the goal line as much as possible. We'll talk about body orientation and how we make that possible. We don't ever want you ahead of play in the attacking third. So again, if the blue area is where the ball is and where active play is, we don't want you in the yellow area, because to be able to see play, you're going to have your back turned to the penalty area and you're going to be looking this direction. which causes problems for us because we're turning our back to the penalty area, which is a high consequence area of the field to not be seeing. So if players go to ground or fall down to the penalty area, we need to be able to see it. And if we have our back to it because we're watching play here, we don't want to have that happen. So we do not want you to be ahead of play in the final third here, because it means you're not able to see inside the penalty area. So you can see here with this red circle, this is what you're missing if you're in the yellow area and looking to the left to be able to see play. This is a terminology you can start to remember. Whether you call it zone 14 or not is irrelevant to me, but this area here, just outside the top of the penalty area and about the width of the D. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with this terminology, this arc here and the line at the top of the penalty area is what we call the D. So this area is an area we want you to stay out of as much as possible, because this is a high density area for players and for goals being scored. We see in soccer a lot of goals getting scored from this area of the field, which means we don't want you to be in there because you might get in the way. And we'll see some examples of that here as we work through the evening. But as much as possible, avoid static positions in this area. Now, of course, you can run through it. That's going to need to happen sometimes, and we'll see some good examples of that. But don't ever take standing positions where you're just standing and watching play in this area, because there's a high probability you're going to be involved in play, you're going to get in the way, and it might be when a team is trying to take a shot, which means you might end up getting hit with the ball, or you might block the goalie's view of a potential shot. So this is a high-risk area that, as much as possible, we want you to avoid being in. Now we talk a little bit about body position. So again, if the play is in the yellow area, referee's looking that direction, you're leaving this red area behind you. You're not able to see it. So even the way you orient your body is important for what you're able to see. Not just the position you take, but the actual way that you orient your body can actually influence whether or not you can see in the penalty area. Same thing here. If you're pointed in this direction, you're still missing what's going on over here in the penalty area, even if it's just in your peripheral vision. And so you leave yourself open to mistakes or to missing potential decisions. Now, if you orient your body so that you're looking towards the goal line, now you're able to see all of this in your peripheral vision. So the difference between orienting your body towards the corner flag and orienting your body towards the goal line can be the difference between seeing the entire penalty area or just a part of it. And then ideally, we would have you sidestep when you need to move laterally across the penalty area, when you're able to, so that you're always keeping your shoulder square to the goal line and you're always seeing in your peripheral vision the entire penalty area. So a couple examples for us to look at. So this gives us just a basic idea of some good things and some areas of improvement for the referee. So the referee definitely takes up a static position right in zone 14. That's an area we don't want you to be in, because the likelihood of the ball bouncing out right here and somebody wanting to take a shot is actually pretty high. So this is a high risk area to be watching this play from, because you've got players around you who may want to get involved in this play and you may block them. So perhaps we don't want to be in this area, but notice the body orientation and the movement when the referee is in high decision-making mode. Notice he orients his shoulders to the goal line, and when he needs to change his angle of view, he sidesteps. He doesn't turn his body and look, because he's got players over here that potentially he might need to worry about with the next phase of play. And by keeping his shoulders square to the goal line, he's able to keep an eye on that in his peripheral vision. But as we talked about with zone 14, this is attacking player here, right here in white. And just before that, he was actually blocking his view. So if the play wanted to drop it back for this player to shoot, referee's right in the way. It's why we want to avoid that area right there in the D. Another example. So this is a good example of why, as referees, we don't want to be ahead of play in the attacking third, and why we don't want to be turning our back to the penalty area. So I'll play it again. We can talk through at a couple different points. So right now, the referee's in a difficult place because he's in an active area. So because he's gotten ahead of play in the attacking third, he's now right in the middle of this and has to do some evasive movement. And now, as you can see, we're in the attacking third, and he's got his back to all these players in and around the penalty area. Now he gets himself out of that. Now he's fine. But again, because he goes deep, because he gets even with the ball and in a moment ahead of play in the attacking third, when this ball goes backwards, he's in a position now where he has to do this, which is now leaving all these players at his back. He can't see what's going on here. And at this moment, watch these guys right here. The attacking player in yellow knocks that guy to the ground to create space for himself. And when he does it, look where the referee's head is. He's watching the ball where he has to be. And he misses this. Now there's a chance maybe that the AR can help him here, but we really don't want ARs this far from play having to make decisions like this, because as you can see, he had another player in his line of view. Maybe he can't tell exactly what happens. It's a long ways away, and the referee's really close. So because he has gone ahead of play in the attacking third, at this moment, he stays ahead of play instead of backpedaling back to here. He has to turn his back, and he misses that foul right there, which now leads to a 1v1 with the goalkeeper, and we might end up having to call a penalty kick on the goalkeeper when instead we should have had a foul here. So it's a good example of why we don't want you ahead of play in that attacking third. So we had a question on the last video if I could demonstrate where the referee should be. Absolutely happy to do that. So at this moment, it's a little bit difficult because we don't know how play got us to that point where this is where the referee is. But once everything gets sort of clogged up there, ideally we would see a burst of movement, and we'll see an example of this later, that moves him out of zone 14 and over to the left side of the D. That way he's getting the same angle of view into this little scrum, but he's outside of this active area. So at this moment, once these players come together, we would ideally see the referee move at pace over to the left side of the D, looking through now all of these players. If he comes over to here, there's no more players at his back. He's not in the center of the players who want to use this space, and he can see everything over here. So a quick burst of speed over to this side of the D would be the ideal scenario for this referee. For the referee in this clip, once he gets himself in trouble, the ideal scenario, instead of backpedaling here, see how he turns himself and backpedals? The ideal scenario for him would have never been to that deep and instead been up here. If he's not this deep at this moment, if he's here or here, now he's not in the middle of the center of players. But once you find yourself in that situation, okay, we have a problem right now. Instead of turning your body with your back to the goal line and backpedaling into this space, we want you to escape this direction and let play pass you by. So at this moment, the ideal scenario would be up here somewhere. So that as that play goes forward, instead of being level with it, which means he has to turn his head this direction, leaving it to the back here, he'd be back here with his body square to the goal line so that out of the left corner of his eye, he can see the ball still, but out of the right corner of his eye, he can still see these players. That way, when this ball gets passed here, he can take a couple of steps backwards, and he's here now. And then when the ball gets played into the penalty area, he moves with speed forward to close that distance. So backpedaling to stay deeper than the ball is going to be important in this kind of a play, so that at this moment, ideally, you're right here with your chest square to the goal line. Other questions on that clip? So we had a question here. This type to forward positioning was very common in the 2018 World Cup. Is that now changed? The answer to that is no. The forward positioning that you saw in the World Cup was in the middle third of the field. Referees were making an effort to get ahead of play in the middle third of the field, but never in the attacking third of the field. We don't want you ahead of play in the attacking third of the field because of these exposures that it leaves you with. Middle third of the field, yes, but that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about penalty area movement. So a couple of other things to think about, specifically as it relates to proximity. You need to be close to plays inside the penalty area so that you have credibility. If you go back to the very first video that we watched, because the referee ran to the left instead of to the right, he ends up about 40 yards from where that foul or potential foul happened. He's no longer in a credible position to be able to make that decision. Maybe he was 30 yards, 40 is probably a bit of a stretch. But to be credible, we need you to be close to these plays, which is going to mean at times going off to the right side of the penalty area. Sometimes it's reasonable to go inside the penalty area. We have to be careful with it, and we only want to do it in certain areas of the penalty area, specifically not in the middle of the penalty area. But there are times when the ball goes down towards the goal line on the outside of the penalty area, or towards the outside of the penalty area, that we actually want you to go in to the penalty area to gain that proximity and that angle of view that you need. And we'll see some examples of that. We also have to be sensitive that we're not too close to play. You can actually get too close to play, particularly inside the penalty area. And again, we'll see some examples of that. And then a little trick, if you find yourself out of position, this usually happens on counterattacks, continue running after you blow the whistle. Blow the whistle while you're blowing the whistle, be running. After you blow the whistle, continue running, because it helps you give the perception of proximity. And again, we'll see an example of that. This is the example of continuing to run while you make your signal. So for this decision, the referee appears to have really excellent proximity to this play. And he's right there, lots of credibility for the decision because he's continued to run. But if we look at the wide angle view of this, at the moment the foul happens, look how far away he is. He's a good 20 yards away probably. But because he keeps running after it, by the time he gives the signal, look how close he is. And so stop and think about what the human brain's going to go through when it sees a foul. The first thing it's going to do is process what it just saw. Then it's going to recognize that you want to look at the referee. And by the time the brain goes through that, that's where you're looking to find the referee. And that's where you think he was at the moment of the foul. So this idea of continuing to run while you're making the decision and after you've made the decision is crucial to give the perception of proximity, if at times you don't have it. I'll let everybody figure out what the topic of this one might be. So this is an example of a referee getting too close inside the penalty area. So again, this is zone 14, and there's no need for the referee to be this close. And now the biggest challenge is, what do you think this guy wants to do with the ball? He probably wants to lay it off to a teammate, except the referee is a 12th man on the field now. He's helping to defend. And so by being too close to play and being inside zone 14, the referee is actually creating a defensive barrier against this player and then blocks this player's ability to get in and defend. So this is an opportunity for us not to get this close and to recognize that at the moment of the decision, it would have been perfectly acceptable to be 3 or 4 steps to the left and a couple steps away from this. You're still 7, 8, 9 yards away from it, and you're outside of this active area of play. Another example. So if we combine all of this stuff that we talked about, the sidestepping in and around the penalty area, the moving to the right of the penalty area when we need to, getting out of zone 14, the body orientation, all of this stuff, if we combine all of this, this is what it looks like. This is a fantastic example of a referee with proper positioning and movement in and around the penalty area. So if we watch this one more time, we recognize the referee is in a good spot. We've got a throw in down here. It's going to go into this area. And so he needs to be able to see through those players. So when we analyze this clip, and I'll break it down point by point, we start with where the drop zone is on the throw in. The throw is going to be a long throw. It's going to land in this area. If we're standing over here in our diagonal, we're not able to see through the players, between the players, to see if there's a push in the back. Our angle of view, if we're over on the left side of the D in our diagonal, is going to mean we're looking through the backs of some of these defenders. We're not going to be able to see if there's a push in the back. So anytime we have play active in this area of the penalty area, we want to be over to the right side of the D here because it allows us the credibility for proximity for decisions inside this penalty area, particularly on the right side. If we're standing over here, when we have to make a decision here, we're not going to be very credible. So the referee starts in a good position, right side of the D. Once the ball gets thrown in, he realizes it's going to land a little closer than he would prefer. So he starts here at the top of the penalty area because it looks like it's going to land there, which gives him a good 12 yards or 14 yards from being in the drop zone. Once the throw in comes, he recognizes it's going to land in this area. If he stands there, it's going to be too close. So he backpedals, and he keeps a good distance away from the play where everybody around him can still get involved in the play here if they want to. He's not in the way. Backpedals further. And as soon as this play starts to come inside now, he closes proximity again. Look at the quick burst there. So as this ball goes into the right side of the penalty area, the likelihood of a decision in this area increases pretty significantly. And you can see the body positioning and the posture of the referee change at that moment. He leans in, he couple quick steps to gain the proximity in case there's a foul and he needs to make a decision. Notice the square body is square to the goal line. He's able to see the entire penalty area at this moment in time in his peripheral vision. Now the play shifts out to the left. He sidesteps. Again, he can see these players over here to the right in his peripheral vision. And once he realizes there's going to be a shot and he's in the middle of zone 14, which he doesn't want to be in, he uses that quick burst of speed to get out of that dangerous area and to give himself the angle of view he needs so that he can still see. And now the space that he just vacated is where the ball ends up. That's why we don't want you in zone 14, because notice where he is right at this moment. Were it not for this burst of speed, he'd be standing exactly where the ball came out and he'd be in the way. So watch it again now, having analyzed all of that, and watch how fluidly he moves and how quickly he adjusts his positions based on what happens touch by touch through this play. So really an excellent piece of positioning and movement by the referee in and around the penalty area. So a couple of questions. Isn't it better to be where you are able to see your AR? It's a very good question. A lot of our very rudimentary teaching for the diagonal the diagonal system of control calls for us to try to keep the ball between the AR and the referee at all times. That's supposed to be a very rudimentary guideline. It doesn't mean at all times you always have to be able to see the AR, because let's be honest, you don't need to see the AR at all times. You need to be aware when there are potential offside situations to be able to see the AR. You need to be able to see the AR when there are potential fouls they may call, but arguably if the AR is going to call a foul, it's probably going to be in this area of the field somewhere, and you're more than likely going to be over here and able to see them. But standing here looking into the penalty area, we don't always need to be in a position where we can see through the play and see the AR. When the referee is standing here looking in this direction, he can probably still see the AR in his peripheral vision. And so when we do have play in this side of the penalty area, we want to be over to the right side of the penalty area not on the left side. Another question, how did it get the name Zone 14? Just out of curiosity. It's actually, Zones 14 is part of a bigger breakdown of the field where there's a bunch of squares, I think it's 18 of them total, 18 squares on the field, and each one has a number. And it just so happens that Zone 14 is the number that's right around the top of the penalty area. So just mere coincidence. Any other questions on what we saw here? Because the next thing we're going to do is just start going through a whole bunch of clips and seeing what the referees are doing and what they could improve upon. Any questions at this point? Okay, then I'll go ahead and move us along. And if you have questions, go ahead and ask them. So I'm going to stop it there because we've actually seen everything we need to see. What I want you to do as the play develops a little bit is watch over here. Watch everything that happens over here. So the two players in white basically tackle the player in red. The referee ends up calling a foul coming out against the attacker. Now, the reason that happens is actually because of the referee's body position and where he chooses to be on the field. As you can see, play is over to the right here, and he has chosen to run right up the middle of the field and be square there, which means now he has to look. You can see him leaning. His body orientation is facing the touch line, not towards the goal line. And now at this moment, he's not able to see what's going on behind him in the penalty area. As this play develops further, because of the position he has taken, his body orientation is that direction, and his head is turned even farther to the right to be able to see what's going on there. And because he's right where he is now in Zone 14, his head has to be turned to be looking over there, which means he can't see what's going on over here. It's outside of his peripheral vision. He can't see it. And so now he's following the ball, and by the time he catches that, all he sees is what appears to be the red player with a headlock in the player to his right and elbowing the player in the left in the face, it looks like. When in reality, he's trying to work his way through having been held. So that's why the referee makes this mistake with this foul, is because his positioning did not allow him to see that. Contrast that with an ideal. The play is over here to the right. If the referee is over in this area now, as this play develops over on the right side of the field, ideally the referee would actually be over here, closer to where number 11 is right now. What that allows him to do now is, as play develops here, he's over behind basically where this player is. Now, this allows him a few things. If this player in red takes this defender on down to the goal line and inside this penalty area here, you may have a penalty area boundary decision to make along this line here in the penalty area. If a foul happens somewhere right around here, the referee actually has to be over here to be able to see it if it's inside or outside. So by being in a position closer to where this defender is, he allows himself to take a few steps to get out to that position if it's needed. At this point, we don't know if it's going to be needed or not because we don't know what this player is going to do with the ball. The other thing this allows the referee to do now is if he stands here and his body orientation is square to the goal line, he can see out of the corner of his eye this player, but his peripheral vision will still allow him to see that something is happening over here that he might need to pay attention to. And then the same thing. Once it's clear this ball is going to be crossed, if he's standing over here, his head is going to be facing that direction, which means in his peripheral, he'll be able to see this is happening. And then all he has to do is shift his eyes. He doesn't actually have to turn his head at all. All he has to do is shift his eyes, which he can do really, really quickly. And if he shifts his eyes, he's going to see these two players holding on to this attacker. So by merely moving over here to the right side of the penalty area, which is where play is, he gives himself better proximity to a potential foul decision here, and he makes it with proper body orientation so that he only has to switch his eyes, not turn his head, to be able to see what's happening here, increases the likelihood of him making an accurate decision. So we said we noticed at some point that the referee had his back to players a couple of times. Perfectly okay to have your back to these players. Not a problem whatsoever. What it's not okay is in these moments to have your back to the penalty area. This kind of body orientation right now in the attacking third is never something we want to see, because we're going to have no idea what's going on back here. And you can see the AR over here is looking there. Referee's looking there. There's nobody watching these players in the penalty area. That's where the referee's body orientation is crucial. So as this play developed over to the right side, we would expect the referee to be a little farther to the right side here. That way, with the proper body orientation, instead of having to turn his head to see at the moment the ball gets crossed, all he has to do is shift his eyes and he'll see this holding going on, and he's able to point at the spot and call a penalty kick. Question here in the pregame talk with the AR is, what do you suggest is said to them about fouls in the penalty area? That is a whole other dissertation on itself, and so we're not going to talk about that right now, but it is a good question, Richard. It's a very good question. What I would suggest you do is go find a webinar I did, I think just a week or two ago. It should be on YouTube by now, covering teamwork and areas of responsibility on the field. That will answer all those questions for you. All right, let's look at another one. So here we have a clear handball. Should be a penalty kick. Watch the replay here really quickly. Clear handball, arm up, blocks the cross, no problem, handball. This is an example of really excellent positioning from the referee. Notice how wide he's gotten at this moment. You may have heard referee coaches at some point say, get wide. This is the kind of scenario where we want you getting wide, because this referee has a potential boundary line decision. If this challenge happens a little farther out, if this player is sliding along this boundary here when the handball happens, the referee's got to be really close to it and in line with it to be able to see if it's inside or outside. And notice where the referee is, right on the line. So if he is forced to make an inside or outside decision here, he has positioned himself absolutely perfectly. The other thing he gets himself here is a tremendous amount of credibility to see this decision. And so no one's going to argue with him at this moment, because he's 6 yards, 7 yards away from it, staring right at it in a perfect position. Now, I show this clip a lot because a lot of referees, instead of being over here, probably would be over here somewhere. We see a lot of referees stand at this corner of the D when play is over in this area. And the problem with that is at the moment of this handball, which is right about there, if you're standing right here, you're not going to be able to see it, because there's a guy standing right between where you would be and where the ball would be. There's a good chance a lot of referees miss this penalty kick because they're standing somewhere over here. They get screened from it. And even if they don't get screened from it, they can't tell if this ball hits the player in the face, the side of the head, or the arm. But because the referee has come way over to the left here, he's got a perfect angle of view to see this. And then if, again, we're thinking ahead, if we're reading play, there's a chance, instead of crossing the ball like this player did, that this player is going to dribble the ball down to the goal line and dribble in. If that happens, we want the referee to be over here looking at this kind of an angle on a decision down in this area, which he's allowed himself to do if it happened by coming over this far left of the penalty area. So a really good example of a referee. Notice where he starts, and while the ball's in the air, he moves. He gets over there, puts himself in the right spot so that at the moment of truth, you can't ask for a better position than that. Any questions on that? And that one's pretty straightforward. Another example. So again, when people talk about getting wide, this is why we're talking about it. The referee comes out wide here so that he leaves this space open for players. You see a lot of referees run right into this space, which is an ideal spot for this player to drop the ball off to a potential teammate. If this player decides to run over here and support him and the referee's standing there, he's right in the way. So it's a really good example of a referee perfectly positioned to see what he needs to see and leaving space open for potential attackers and defenders to run into. So when you hear referee coaches say get wide, it's not a platitude. It doesn't mean every time the ball goes to a specific spot, you have to go run wider than it is. But there are times, and we've seen a couple of them now, where it is ideal to move outside of the center of the field. And this is a very good example of one. Once this through ball goes through and he sees that it's going to go to the left side of the penalty area, he runs at pace. You can see him, he's sprinting here. Runs at pace to close proximity, get an angle of view, and leave space open for the players to play in. So a really good example here of a referee on the left side of the penalty area. And then notice as the play comes across, he doesn't just stand there and watch. He immediately runs at pace again to adjust his position to be able to see. You'll notice with a lot of these that the referees are displaying some sort of continual movement. They don't just stand with their feet planted and watch. They're constantly moving a little bit. It may not be running, it may not be sprinting, it may not be moving a long way, but they're doing micro adjustments to their position to gain an angle of view, particularly in and around the penalty area when the angle can change really, really quickly. So we had a question here. Can I repeat? When does the referee need to get deep inside the penalty area in case there's a potential decision on the goal line? Yeah, so Eduardo, I'm going to go back to the last clip for that one, actually. So at this moment, and in the one coming next, there's a good opportunity for these players to dribble the ball down towards the goal line and then trail in, right? We see players every once in a while. It doesn't happen terribly often. But every once in a while, they dribble down to the goal line, they beat the defender, and they dribble in, and then they look to lay it across. Those are the kind of scenarios where we don't want to be standing outside the penalty area, nearly 20 yards away from it, looking, between bodies or through bodies, I guess. We want to be looking between them. So as this play develops, at this moment, there's a good chance, even though this player decides to cross it, that he's going to dribble the ball down to the goal line. If he dribbles the ball to the goal line and keeps trying to come in and this player follows him, we want to be looking at it from this angle of view because we want to see between two players. Remember, you always want to be seeing between the players somehow. So if they're running side by side, you need to be directly behind them so you can see between them. And so if this player goes to the goal line and this player is chasing him and they're side by side, if you stand here, you can't see anything. But if you come farther down this direction and you follow them in, now you can see that angle that you need to see. So again, it doesn't happen very often, but there are times where a player runs down to the goal line, another player chases them at an angle, and you need to come into this area to be able to see what's happening. Hope that answers the question for you. Another example. So there's another example of a referee getting over to the left to be able to make a decision here. At the moment that tackle happens, the referee has got a wide enough position to be able to see if any contact happens. Now, ideally, the referee would have been over here. A perfect position from this referee would have been out in this area a little bit because then he can see the ball. At this moment, he can't quite see the ball, so he's going to have to guess a little bit. But if he comes out where we saw those referees before out at this corner of the penalty area, he's able to see this perfectly clearly. So contrast this one, and again, we'll play it one more time, and the movement. See how the referee stops short and comes back to the inside there instead of continuing his run wider? Contrast that with this referee, who when that ball goes through, takes that more extreme angle and gets out to this area. If this next referee had done that, would he have the best possible angle? The answer is yes. If he comes out to here, he can see this very, very clearly. This one, he can see it, but he can't see it clearly. So we can improve by coming out here. So you can see how movement is also just as important as positioning. You have to move hard and at the right times to get to the spot you need to be. Another example. So this is a really excellent spot for this referee to be in. Gets outside of zone 14, so there's no problem there. Takes up a position just outside the penalty area. Body orientation is square. He can see this player. He can see everybody. Got somebody right behind him, so maybe a little bit to the left. But all things considered, at the moment he needs to call a penalty kick. Is anybody really going to reasonably argue with him when he's standing 6 yards away from it? You can't ask for much better positioning than this play. Player commits a challenge, leaps out right there, studs to the ankle, referee staring right at it. You come back and look at this thing later on, no one's really going to be able to argue with a referee standing right there and looking at it. Now, best practice would be for the referee to be just outside of this area. Because the problem here, if you were going to find one, is that we've got this circle of players that all want to be involved in the play, and the referee standing right in the middle of them. Whenever you see these circles form on the field, try not to be standing right in the middle of them, because these are players that are going to want to be involved in the play somehow, and you may be blocking their view. So the only thing this referee could have done was be a little farther over here, again, like we've seen some of the previous referees. Same angle of view, going to be able to see it clearly, but you're outside of this circle of players. But at the end of the day, pretty good spot for the referee to make this decision from. Another example. So watch it one more time. And let's have an honest conversation about how credible this decision is. So the challenge with this one, and this is a perfect example of why we want to move to the right side of the penalty area. Play goes towards the right side of the penalty area. And at the moment we have a foul, we have no idea if that's inside or outside. We just simply don't know. And the referee over here has no clue whatsoever. He's not able to see any kind of proper angle to know if that foul happened inside or outside the penalty area. You can see the player started on the outside, a player's reaching in. Can any of us say with absolute certainty that that's inside or outside the penalty area? The answer to that is no. This boundary line here is solely the referee's responsibility. The inside or outside of this boundary line is only the referee's responsibility. The AR is not able to help with that. But in this play, because the referee has gone towards the center of the field instead of to the right side, he needs the AR to guess for him and tell him if it's inside or outside. And as you can see here, he blows the whistle initially, starts to move towards it, goes, uh-oh, I don't know, is making eye contact here with the assistant referee. You can see him there making eye contact. Assistant referee says inside. and so the referee points to the inside. At the end of the day, nobody in this crew knew what actually happened here. The only way for them to get this right is if the referee is over here. So as this play develops, we would want the referee running in this direction. And once the players all shift to go to the right, we would want the referee, instead of moving to the left like he is now, to be shifting over into this direction, probably somewhere between these two players at this moment over here. That way, as this player takes him on, now a quick burst of speed gets him out to right here. And if he's right here and his body is square to the goal line, out of the left side of his peripheral vision, he can still see this entire area while he's focusing here. So at this moment right now, an ideal position for the referee is right here, right where the mouse is. Square to the goal line. You can see this clearly. You can see the AR out of the side corner of your eye, and you can still see all of these players. And now, if this player crosses the ball instead of getting tripped, you're positioned right here. All you have to do is shift your eyes, and you can see through all of these players to know if there's a push or a hold that takes place. So this is a perfect example of how we want to be over on the right side of the penalty area for decisions just like this, instead of being in the center of the field or to the left. Any questions on that? We had a request, do we have any corner kick examples? Not on this one, because this is penalty area movement during active play. I can do one on set piece management that might give us some better examples. Other questions on this idea of getting to the right side of the penalty area? I know that might be counter to something you've been taught early in your referee development. Let's see another one here. We'll end with this one. Referee calls a penalty kick. Another good example of why we want to be over on the right side of the penalty area. So as you can see here, he's moving to the left instead of moving over to the right, so he can get a boundary line decision here. When we go back and watch the replay, this is very clearly outside the penalty area. But because the referee is moving to the inside of the field, he just simply can't see it. His depth perception doesn't allow him to see it, and so he gets this wrong. The ideal scenario here, the referee's in a good spot to start. When this ball gets played through, ideally we would see the referee move to the right here to be in this area of the field at the moment that the player brings the ball in. So ideally the referee is over here at this moment, and when this player dribbles the ball in, the referee can continue on to the inside and look through the penalty area from over here. Now, a lot of us will ask, doesn't that put our backs to the assistant referee? The answer is yes, but there's also no reason we need to be looking at the referee on this, or the assistant referee on this play. The player with the ball is closest to the goal line, which negates any potential offside decision we have to make here. So by following in and being close to a potential foul here, if the referee is right here when that foul happens, he points to the spot. Nobody's going to disbelieve him, but he's going to be able to see it here that it was on the outside. So moving to the right side of the penalty area, crucial for situations like this where we have to get this boundary line decision correct. So we had a question here. I'm going to pause now. We won't look at any more videos because we're right at the 8 o'clock mark. So we had a question here. Could you go over situations where the AR should give the referee information about if a foul was inside or outside? Only on this boundary line. This is the only inside or outside boundary that we ask the AR to be involved with, and it's because they can be lined up directly with it and see it. This one, they can't see it. They don't have the depth perception to know if it's inside or outside. For the same reason we want them lined up directly with the second to last opponent for offside, we want the referee lined up here looking down this. Imagine an AR trying to make a boundary line decision, the ball in or out of play, 12 yards off the line that he's doing it from. It's not possible. It's just simply not possible. So ARs give input on inside or outside on this boundary line, referee is solely responsible for this boundary line. Good question. Another one, in this scenario, the referee stays right and follows and the player crosses the ball. What pass should the referee take to get to the left side if action engages there? It's a really good question. So if this play develops and he doesn't get fouled, the referee has run over to the right. If the play goes immediately, the ball gets crossed here, a player's going to take a shot on goal, we would want the referee just to stay over here. It's okay to stay over here temporarily. If the ball gets crossed in the air to the back post and it goes a long ways away and a play is going to stay active over the left side, we would want the referee to back out and sprint around or through zone 14, as we saw this referee do a little earlier, and get back over to this side of the field. We don't want to see the referee run through the penalty area because, again, that's a dangerous area. But once this ball goes across, we would want the referee to backpedal out to this area and then move around the D at pace over to this side. So a question here. With these new positioning directives, should communication between the referee and AR have to be rethought in terms of calling offside? The answer to that is no. Flag goes up. There's going to be people calling for it. Easy enough for you to glance over and see it. We don't have to rethink communication at all. So Henry, a question, is it the same for attackers on goal kicks? I'm not sure what you mean by that. So if you could rephrase the question, I'm not sure what you're getting at. Any other questions? Henry, you can email me your question if you'd like. I'd be happy to respond. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you joining. I'm sorry I've gone a couple minutes long, but hope everybody enjoyed the session tonight. And wish you all the best, happy health, happy everything else. Stay safe. Have a good night. Bye-bye, folks.